Hey, how's it going, everybody? It's your boy, Delightful Kiss Boy, and today I'm going to be teaching you why you may or may not be losing so much money on slots, why RTP barely matters for the average slot player, and why actually playing at a higher RTP machine may be losing you more money depending on what your goals are when you sit down to play. I was surprised by the data myself, so if that sounds interesting to you, stick around, consider subscribing. I do all sorts of gambling analysis, I look at the math, I code things out, I simulate things, and above all else, I'm kind of a goofy dude, alright? We have a fun time, okay? So let's just get into it, alright? Has this ever happened to you? Have you ever left your home with, fists full of cash, palms full of ducats, and wandered off to your local mom and pop casino such as this to go try to make the money in the slot zone? We all love the slot zone. You just go and you sit down and you push a button. You're basically watching mobile game ads for like 5 hours straight. That's what these games look like to me, but they're flashing, they're fun, they're bright, and you love to push buttons. But then before you know it, oh my gosh, you've lost all of your money, every single penny, and you're crying. You start wandering back home. You don't even, remember where you live anymore. You've lost your identity as a person, and before you know it, you're dead. All right? Has this ever happened to you? Well, how could this happen? How could this happen? Well, first thing you gotta know is that you're playing slots, you fucking dipshit. What did you think was gonna happen? Look, I mean, honestly, like, everybody knows that slots suck ass, but you're doing it anyway, okay? But here's the thing. I'm gonna be fair here. What if you want to play slots and not lose all of your money? You love the flashing lights, you love the bonus rounds, you love the stupid bullshit that they pack into there to make it feel like you have control over the outcome, but you actually don't. But you want to play more, okay? Well, how do you play and not lose every single penny to your name? Do you play higher RTP slots? Do you set profit goals? Do you set stop losses? Do you look at what YouTubers say are the best and worst slots to play and use that to, play accordingly? Well, let's see what happens using some code, okay? So we're going to be testing 3 different slot machines here, all right? So the first one I mentioned a lot in my prior videos. It is red, white, and blue over here. A pretty old machine, but it's a machine that we can get some data about, all right? Which I'll get into that in a bit here. We've also got Lucky Larry's Lobstermania, which is my favorite theme by far. I love the idea of being like, they're gonna love a lobster-themed slot machine. The thing that I think about when I think of making big money is lobsters, Actually, I kind of do. I want to go out and get some, nice lobster rolls and shit, but here we go. This must have been, marketed toward Bostonians or something, but there you have it, all right? And then on the right here, we've got Double Diamond Deluxe in all of its glory. Now, let's go through these machines and talk about their RTPs, because that's really the only information that you're going to be able to get out of them, the useful information that you're going to be able to get out of the machine. They have pay tables, obviously, but it doesn't matter if they don't tell you the likelihood of any outcome, okay? So on the left here, with red, white, and blue, we have about an 86.6% RTP, meaning that if you put $1 into the machine, you should be getting about 86 cents out on average per spin. With Lucky Larry's Lobstermania, we have a slightly lower RTP, around 85%. And finally, we have our beautiful Double Diamond Deluxe with a whopping 92.5% RTP. Now, these RTPs all, kind of suck, but obviously Double Diamond Deluxe's is the best, and it's kind of nearing the standard that you should be holding yourself to when you go to a casino, all right? There's about a 7.5% house edge, which is 2.5% more, so I guess 2% more than like a roulette table. So it's not the worst. It could be better, but it's not the best. So just keep in mind, Lucky Larry's Lobstermania, lowest RTP, middle RTP is red, white, and blue, highest RTP is Double Diamond Deluxe, okay? Well, wait a second, how did I simulate these? In a previous video, I was talking about par sheets and how those are proprietary, right? So it's actually copyright infringement to be publishing those par sheets. Well, I actually was able to get the numbers for these 3 machines in particular. Red, white, and blue, There was a published odds table in the Netherlands for some reason, and I was just able to get my hands on that. Also with Lucky Larry's Lobstermania, there was an in-depth mechanical breakdown in a Canadian research paper where they were basically able to go to a certain number of slot machines, go to the manufacturers, and actually get their hands on par sheets for the purposes of making a research paper talking about in depth about, you know, how these slots work. I will link to that paper in the description, and it goes over a bunch of different slot machines, but Lucky Larry's Lobstermania is one of the ones where they broke down everything in detail. So I was able to replicate it, simulate it in C#, and I'll be talking more about the code in the nerd zone. Stick around to the end if that sounds good to you. If you don't care, feel free to skip it. I don't care. And then finally, we got Double Diamond Deluxe, which is included in that same Canadian research paper, but there was no mechanical breakdown available. However, they had a pay table that had the probabilities of all the different outcomes. So without replicating the underlying mechanics, I was able to essentially simulate accurately how a Double Diamond Deluxe machine would perform just based on the probabilities of each outcome. All right, so I'll talk more about that in the nerd zone. Once again, stick around if that sounds cool to you. Otherwise, I'm just going to be going through the results. And I also have to shout out my boy, Wizard of Odds. I went to his website and I was drawing from it heavily when I was writing my simulations. Always a resource. I will also link to Wizard of Odds in the description down below. Check it out if you want to know more about the math behind gambling. All right, it's a great website. But let's just get into it. Let's test this, you know, goddamn shit, and let's go over the parameters for these tests. All right, so I've got, once again, 100,000 bots, and each of these bots is going to have a $75 bankroll to start out with. They're each going to be making fixed 75-cent bets, which means that each of our bets is about 1%, well, it is exactly 1% of our starting bankroll. This was because many slot machine YouTubers, people who play slots a lot, will recommend a bet amount that's about 1% of your bankroll. So I was like, okay, well, I'll abide by that rule here, all right? What I'm going to do is I'm going to simulate playing slots with different betting strategies and getting the session end totals, basically your ending bankroll, following these different betting strategies, and the spin counts. And I'm going to simulate 100,000 sessions per strategy per machine. Now, when I say strategy, what am I talking about? Well, here's the thing, okay? When a lot of people go into the casino and they go to a slot machine, they're going to put their credit card in and they're going to get a certain number of credits, okay? So it'll be like $75 in credits. When they spin it, they're going to like win some money, and then that total is going to go up or it's going to go down. Now, a lot of people will not be keeping track of how many spins they do. You know, many people are just going to go in and they're going to keep pushing the button either until they hit a jackpot or they run out of money, all right? So what I'm doing is I'm going to be simulating different types, like different play styles of when you start and when you end. I guess when you end, not when you start. Everybody starts at the same time. But when you end your session, okay, and we're going to see how they perform, all right? Because at the end of the day, people don't really care as much about house edge or RTP. They want to see what's my outcome going to look like at the end of a day at a casino, all right? So let's get into it. Our first strat is very simple, and this would be for our robots out there who are actually going to sit there and count the number of spins that they do at a casino. So in this case, you're going to let the slot spin exactly 100 times. As I said earlier, there's 75-cent bets. We have $75, so if we lost every single spin, we would be at $0 at the end of this, okay? So here are the results, and I'm going to kind of briefly go through them. You can look at them, on your own time. You can pause the video, look at the data, but I'm just going to kind of highlight interesting data points as I see them. So first of all, we've got red, white, and blue, which had an average ending bankroll of $65.37, which means on average, the bots playing red, white, and blue following this strategy lost $9.63 each. This was an average RTP of 87.16%, which is pretty close to that 86.6% number that we talked about earlier. On average, it took 100 spins because they all just did 100 spins. And the standard deviation was $78.59. Now, talking about what standard deviation is a little bit outside of the scope of this video, but you can essentially think of it as kind of the distance that most data points took from the average, okay? So what you can think about is a higher standard deviation means a higher variance machine. Basically, you have a larger spread of outcomes, all right? So you have bots losing more or winning more if the standard deviation is higher, okay? So those were our results for red, white, and blue. Then next we have Lucky Larry's Lobstermania, my favorite. I'm gonna have a hard time saying that over and over again. I can just tell, a lot of alliteration there. And the ending bankroll for Lucky Larry's Lobstermania was $62.81, meaning a $12.19 loss. So on average, the bots playing LLL, lost more money on average, with an average RTP of 83.75% and a higher standard deviation than red, white, and blue, meaning that Lucky Larry's Lobstermania so far has the highest variance that we've seen so far, all right? And then we have Double Diamond Deluxe, which had the lowest loss of only $5.42 on average, meaning that it had a 92.77% RTP, which is close to that 92.5% number talked about earlier. And the standard deviation on Double Diamond Deluxe was $48.30. So this kind of gives us our baseline here, all right? So as we can see, the RTP numbers are close to the advertised amounts, the advertised percentages, and we kind of get an idea of what the variance on these machines are. So Lucky Larry's Lobstermania, lowest RTP, highest variance. Red, white, and blue, kind of middle of the road. And then we've got Double Diamond Deluxe, highest RTP, lowest variance, okay? Now let's look at profit versus loss, okay? So with red, white, and blue, 37.44% of the bots profited, with 0.62% of them breaking even. With Lucky Larry's Lobstermania, 19.84% profited and 0.27% broke even. And finally, with Double Diamond Deluxe, 28.88% profited and 0.8% broke even. So something interesting to note is that even though the RTP on Double Diamond Deluxe was 92.77%, fewer bots overall came out ahead than the ones that played red, white, and blue. But by far, the most losers played Lucky Larry's Lobstermania, okay? Now let's take a look at the chart here. So this is a chart where I plot out basically the different outcomes for the different bots playing with different slot machines. So in red, we have red, white, and blue. In green, we've got Lucky Larry's Lobstermania. And finally, Double Diamond Deluxe is in blue right here. So as we can see, actually, let me mention this too. Over here, I put the maximum profits for each of these machines. As we can see here, the max profit was red, white, and blue with $2,669.50. So one lucky bot started off with 75 bucks, walked out with 2,669 bucks. Lucky Larry's Lobstermania, the max was $1,539. And Double Diamond Deluxe had the lowest maximum payout with $1,300 or so. Okay, so let's just take a look at this data right here. So as we can see, this is the $75 mark at this black line here. And with Double Diamond Deluxe, you see that there's a lot fewer of these higher, basically, end totals, right? So we can see Lucky Larry's Lobstermania actually had proportionally a lot higher number of bots walking out with a lot of money than these other two slots, okay? But you can see that with Double Diamond Deluxe, a lot more bots are losing a modest amount of money as opposed to red, white, and blue and Lucky Larry's Lobstermania, where a lot more bots are losing a lot of money, okay? So basically, there are fewer total winners with Double Diamond Deluxe, but the ones that lost less money on average than the other two slot machines, okay? So it's kind of interesting. Let's move on to the next strategy here. Now this one is 100 spins, so fixed 100 spins, but with respins on ties. So in the last video I published about slot machines, I talked about how pushes were deceptive and they changed, RTP numbers and led you to the wrong conclusions. But in this case, actually only red, white, and blue had ties out of all of these machines, all right, these 3 machines. So I just reran red, white, and blue and saw what the results were, okay? So here we've got our 2 different sets of data. The first one in red is for ties. So basically the one where we basically respect ties, we get the ties, and we just keep what we get, okay? The second one has no ties taken into account, meaning that we respin all of the ties that we see until we either win or we lose. Okay, so in this case, you can see the average losses went up for the no ties bots. The RTP went down by about 2%, which is what I talked about in my last video, and the average number of spins went up to about 114 spins, which makes sense because I think you tie about 12% of the time in red, white, and blue. So it makes sense that you get 14 extra spins or so with the no tie scenario. And you can see here the standard deviation also increases. So basically, if you respin ties, you're reducing your RTP because you're taking more spins at a losing game, and you're increasing your variance, okay? Now, as far as profit versus loss goes, we see that between ties and no ties, if you basically respin ties, your chances of profiting drop, and you basically are more likely to lose money. So let's take a look here at the graph we've got. And we can see that they're pretty close. They're pretty close, but we see there are way more of the bots that ignore ties and respin them, losing almost all of their money, than there are with the red, white, and blue bots that just take the tie and just do a flat 100 spins, okay? But otherwise, it kind of starts to converge as you get further away from this $75 mark. But you can see here, there are more bots on average you're winning a little bit more when you do the no ties solution, but there's a lot more bots losing overall with the no tie strategy, okay? So we're going to move on to another strategy here, which is to stop after any profit. So basically, as soon as we have more than our bankroll, we just stop immediately. So if we had 75 bucks and we spun once and we won $2, right? We would just immediately stop and go home. Now, this is a pretty unrealistic strategy, so this is more just kind of illustrate a point and give us kind of an idea for future reference when we're looking at other strategies, okay? But you can see here that by far the best machine in terms of RTP following this strategy is Double Diamond Deluxe, with a 94.06% effective RTP. Now, I should mention, these are effective RTPs. RTP obviously is advertised as a spin-by-spin number. This RTP we're talking about is for the entire session, okay? So I'm using the term in that sense, all right? So obviously, Double Diamond Deluxe, the RTP of the machine is 92.5%, but if you stop immediately as soon as you get into profit, we see here that is a 94.06% session RTP. And you can see here across the board, the average number of spins went down, and the RTPs went up. Now, it's because, once again, fewer spins when you're playing at slots means bigger wins. The less you play, the better, all right? And we can see here the standard deviations, at least I think our red, white, and blue stayed about the same, it looks like, but I believe they dropped for these other two at least, all right? So the variance goes down, our average number of spins goes down, our RTP goes up, and our average losses are decreased, okay? And you can see profit versus loss. There are a lot more bots profiting than not following the strategy. A whopping 81.77% profiting following Double Diamond Deluxe. Let's take a look at the chart here. Now, as you can see here, now, because we're basically doing an all or nothing sort of thing where we're trying to profit, we're going to lose it all. Now when we're losing a lot more money. We're basically losing all of our money when we lose, okay? So you can see here across the board, all of the slot machines have no data points in this kind of like $25 to $75 range. It's basically zero or you profit a little bit, okay? And the max profits also decreased following this strategy, but we have a high occurrence of success, basically a high probability of coming out ahead, all right? Now, once again, the RTP is still negative. Your expected value is negative because proportionally you stand to lose more than you stand to gain. Nobody's going to really be stoked about winning $5 when you could lose $75, but that's just how the strategy goes, all right? So high likelihood of succeeding with a modest profit versus a small chance of losing all of your money, okay? So barely anyone's going to be doing this, but we're going to be using this as future reference. So the next strategy we're going to be talking about is stopping after a 25% profit. So if you're starting with $75, I think that's about, what is that, like 15 bucks or so, all right? After you win about $15 to $20, you're going to stop. And here we go. So the results are that basically the average number of spins went up and the average RTP dropped. And in this case of Double Diamond Deluxe, they dropped pretty significantly. And you can see here, surprisingly, so like a 25% profit is a pretty small profit, right? If somebody sat down and they had $100 and they wanted to get to $125, you wouldn't tell them that that's a ridiculous goal, usually, depending on whatever game they're playing, right? But you can see here that Double Diamond Deluxe, our highest RTP machine, is all of a sudden performing pretty badly compared to Red, White, and Blue. I mean, it's about the same range here, but you would expect Double Diamond Deluxe to perform a lot better. As we saw earlier, when we were looking at the stop after any profit, Red, White, and Blue was looking great. It was at 94% RTP. But here, our session RTP drops to 81.83% as soon as we set a slightly higher goal. And you can see here, it's because the average number of spins went up to 254 spins on average for Double Diamond Deluxe. And the standard deviation has almost doubled since last time with an $80.62 standard deviation. Now, RTP has dropped for the other two as well, but less proportionally, we're talking about, you're going from 100 spins to 125 or 128 spins. The variance has gone up, but by far, Double Diamond Deluxe has taken the biggest hit in terms of performance, okay? And that was our highest RTP machine. And as you can see here, still, Lucky Larry's Lobstermania, only 31% are profiting, whereas the other two are around 50%. So let's take a look at our graph here. As you can see, there are significantly more bots losing all of their money. Close to 70% of Lucky Larry's Lobstermania players lost all of their money. And you can see here that this is about the $100 mark or so is where all of the bots are ending up that are profiting, essentially, all right? And a few of them are winning big still, but not too many because we have a pretty modest goal, okay? So, strat number 5, and this would be probably a pretty common strat that you'd find at the casino, is trying to 2x your bankroll, aka 100% profit, okay? So now, let's take a look at how the numbers have changed, and my God, look at Double Diamond Deluxe. 65.78% effective RTP, 461 spins, and a $102 standard deviation. What is going on? This was our highest RTP machine, but all of a sudden it's doing the worst. Compared to these two, now it is our worst machine when we're trying to just 2x our bankroll. And as you can see here, if you're going to sit down at a machine and try to double your money, that's only going to be happening about 20 to 30% of the time, and that's if you just full sending it the entire time, right? Most of the time, about 75% of the time, you're going to be losing all of your money depending on the machine, okay? So this is a pretty unrealistic goal, but that's a goal that a lot of people are pursuing at the casino, if not making more of a profit, right? So let's take a look at our chart here. As you can see here, close to 80,000, 70 to 80,000 bots each are losing all of their money, while a significantly smaller proportion of them are making a 2x profit, essentially going up to $150 or more, all right? And the max profits for Lucky Larry's Lobstermania has now jumped up by quite a bit. Now, Lucky Larry's Lobstermania has this weird bonus round that can give you a lot of money. That's why it's a high variance machine, because it can have very high jackpot payouts. I'll talk more about that in the nerd zone, but that's where this figure is coming from, all right? But Double Diamond Deluxe stinking it up, and that was what I thought was going to be the best machine. So we're going to move on to stopping after a 400% profit, basically 5xing your bankroll, all right? So a lot of people, I think that this would also be a reasonable goal for them. They'd come in with like $100, stop after they get $500 or more. Let's see how they did, all right? Now, once again, Double Diamond Deluxe is our worst machine with 37.22%, but it's also pretty close to Red, White, and Blue, surprisingly, which has 37.46%. But look at this. Lucky Larry's Lobstermania all of a sudden has a 61.47% RTP. Compared to these other two, it's killing it, right? Which is crazy. And actually what's interesting is the variance on Lucky Larry's Lobstermania is lower than the variance with Red, White, and Blue now. And it's because, once again, it takes fewer spins. So basically with Lucky Larry's Lobstermania, you have fewer wins, but when you win bigger. So you're getting closer to those, higher, loftier goal amounts. And so your effective RTP when you're trying to set this sort of goal is going to be higher because it's a higher variance machine that lets you get those bigger targets, those bigger wins, okay? And as you can see here, close to 10%, though playing Lucky Larry's Lobstermania, profited versus about 5% with both of these machines. But as you can see here, as we're kind of going through this, there's roughly no correlation between your effective session RTP and the advertised per spin RTP on the machine. It has more to do with variance and how the prize payouts align with your goals. And of course, these are hidden from you. I'll talk more about this in the conclusion. I'm getting ahead of myself. But let's take a look at that chart, baby. Oh my God. Like 95% of bots losing all of their money. And over here, we have a tiny little group that were able to profit big. Once again, Lucky Larry's Lobstermania with the big payouts. Lowest RTP, best performing in this case. And now finally we have our stopping after 900% profit, which is 10xing our bankroll. And once again, Lucky Larry's Lobstermania, our lowest RTP machine, killing it. I mean, it's still not good, but it has an effective 38.46% RTP as opposed to the around 20% RTP for these other two machines. And 3.35% playing Lucky Larry's Lobstermania profited, while, only about 1 to 2% profited with the other two strategies. And as you can see here, Double Diamond Deluxe is sitting at an average number of spins of 1,086 spins, dragging down the effective RTP by a lot, baby. So here's our final chart here. We've got almost all the bots losing all their money. Tiny, tiny, tiny proportion making more than $300. So, I mean, in this case, 10xing your money would be over $750. Just kind of cut it off here because, there aren't that many bots getting all the way out here. All right, so let's recap. Let's look at all the charts back to back. This is our chart for any gain. This is our chart for 25%. So as you can see here, basically what's happening is the division between our profitable bots and our lossy bots, the ones who are losing, starts to grow and grow and grow. So these kind of points are going to climb higher. These points out here are going to drop lower and move out. All right, so this is any gain, 25%, 2x, 5x, 10x. All right, so as you can see, as we start to set loftier and loftier goals, barely anyone's coming out ahead, baby. But the ones that are the ones playing Lucky Larry's Lobstermania, what we thought was our worst slot based on RTP. Well, let's take a look at these if we added stop loss, all right? Because a lot of people, they're going to be doing this kind of in a two-step sort of a thing. Basically, they're going to be setting a goal, and then they're going to be saying, okay, either this or after I do like 100 spins, or I'm here for like a couple hours or whatever, okay? So we're going to rerun all of the rerun all the sessions for the previous strategies, but we're going to stop after one of two things happen. Either we hit our goal, or we spin 100 times. Now, obviously, people, once again, are probably not counting the number of spins, but this should also be somewhat representative of the people that are sitting down for like a fixed 2-hour period, okay? So we have any gain here, all right? So this is our no stop chart up here, and this is our 100 spin stop. So as you can see here, with the no stop, it's like basically all or nothing, right? You're either losing all of your money or you're profiting. In this case, you're either profiting or you're losing some of your money, because it's either going to be you hit your target or you stop after 100 spins. So there's a lot fewer bots that are losing all of their money. So stop loss basically increases RTP across the board because you have fewer overall spins. So as we can see here are results for the different slot machines. The effective RTP with the any gain strategy goes up from 89.41% on red, white, and blue to 92.26% when you stop after 100 spins or you hit your goal. With across the board here, it's like you gain a few percentage points in RTP, effective RTP, with a whopping 97.31% RTP with Double Diamond Deluxe if you have a stop loss and an any gain goal. The chance to profit decreases, though, as you can see here. The any gain strategy, you're more likely to succeed if you just send it until you profit. Excuse me. Because basically, you know, you're trying to get ahead or you're going to die trying. And the variance decreases. So red, white, and blue, it goes from $78.77 to $63. And as you can see here, the variance is decreased pretty significantly for Double Diamond Deluxe. Now with 25% gain, it's pretty much the same thing. As we can see here, we have all these people losing all their money versus these people who are, you know, profiting 25%. In this case, there's once again a lot fewer profiting, but the ones that are losing less money on average. They're not losing all of their money. 100% gain, similar thing. But there's a thing you're going to start to notice. Once again, you can pause and look at the numbers if you're interested. I just kind of want to look at the trend here. As we start going through, you're going to notice the bottom chart stops changing much at all. All right, so basically, there's a big change from here to here. There's a smaller change from here to here. There's a basically unnoticeable change from here to here, and there's like barely any change at all from the 400% gain to the 900% gain when you're stopping after 100 spins. It's because there's barely any number of bots that are able to do a more than 100% gain in fewer than 100 spins, all right? So you end up just kind of ending up with our initial charts, with our initial 100 spin fixed charts, all right? So what are the conclusions that we can draw from this? Excuse me, I'm losing my voice at the end of this presentation. What the hell's going on? Well, for goal-based play, where I'm talking about you're going to sit down and you're going to play until you hit a specific dollar amount, variance is more important than RTP, it seems like. It's kind of like, and it kind of just more specific than that, it depends on just how the different prizes correlate to the different goal amounts, right? So obviously, if there is a prize payout that's going to put you over your goal, and it's pretty likely on a machine compared to another machine, that machine is going to help you get to that goal amount better than the other machines. The thing about this, though, is that information is hidden from the player. The only thing that you're able to go off of is RTP. Now, RTP does represent outcomes for certain types of slot players, all right? If you're playing for a fixed number of spins or a fixed duration, the RTP is going to be more representative of your outcomes, okay? And in addition to that, you can get a kind of a reasonable compromise by having a goal with a stop, but doing this doesn't really do anything for you if you're trying to more than 2x your money. As we saw earlier, essentially, if you're trying to 10x your money within 100 spins, that's virtually impossible. Like, the difference between the 400% gain and the 900% gain, basically indistinguishable between these two charts, all right? So you're barely ever going to hit your mark if you're setting a, cap that isn't going to help you, accommodate that. Basically, if you have a 1% fixed bet, of your bankroll, you're just never going to hit those higher targets depending on the machines. And so that's kind of my conclusions there. It was interesting to me that Double Diamond Deluxe sucked so hard, but hopefully you found this interesting. And now I'm going to turn it over to the Nerd Zone, where I kind of walk through the code a bit and explain how the machines work. So hope you enjoyed. All right. Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome to the Nerd Zone. I'm going to be walking through some code. If that sounds interesting to you, you may be a dweeb, and if it doesn't, you're a normal person and you can just log off. I don't care. But we're going to go through some of the code. I want to explain how I coded up these 3 different slot machines, starting with red, white, and blue. Now, red, white, and blue was pretty much the easiest one to replicate, all right? So basically, we've got 3 different reels that have a sequence of different symbols, all right? So these are the different symbols, as we can see here. They'll just have them as enums over here. So you can see there's blank, 1 bar, 2 bar, 3 bar, blue 7, white 7, red 7, okay? So let's go back here. So we have reel 1 has all these different numbers on here, blah, 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 blah. And it has very few red 7s. I think it only has 1, actually. Let me check. There's 1 red 7. Yeah, there's just 1 red 7, it looks like, all right? Reel 2 has a bunch of these things, and it has very few white 7s. It might just have 1 white 7, okay? And reel 3 has all these symbols, and this one has only 1 blue 7, okay? So this is where these machines get deceptive, okay? Because they'll have reels set up like this. They'll have this symbol distribution. You can see here on these other reels, there's a bunch of, there's a good number of, like, blue 7s, for example, on reel 2. The thing is, though, the jackpot payout needs to get a red 7 on reel 1, a white 7 on reel 2, and a blue 7 on reel 3. But only 1 out of, like, 40 symbols on each of those reels is the symbol you need. So there's 1 out of 40 that are red 7s on reel 1, 1 out of 40 on reel 2 of white 7s, and, blue is 1 out of 40 as well. So it's a extremely low chance that you're actually going to get a payout here. So I just have the different reels here represented up here. And here we go. Basically what I do is I just have the spin function that goes through and chooses a random symbol basically off of each of these reels. It's an even distribution, basically equal probability that you'll hit any of these kind of rows on the reel, but as I said earlier, there's, for example, 3 rows right here that are 2 bar, so you're significantly more likely to hit those than, red 7, for example. So basically, just choose them at random, and then you score it, okay? And the way that you score the symbols is basically you're just checking, okay, does reel 1 have a red 7, white 7, blue 7? Then I get a certain payout, which is a multiple of my initial bet amount, and I just kind of go down the whole way with these different payouts. As I said earlier, there's the Wizard of Odds page that kind of goes through red, white, and blue in depth. I'll link that in the description. You can take a look at the payout table there more clearly. This is a very simple slot machine, right? It's just basically each reel, you spin them, you score them, you see what happens, and I'm just checking to see if you get any prize based on the spin. That's how red, white, and blue works. Let's go to Double Diamond Deluxe next. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I was not able to get my hands on the underlying mechanics. I forgot to put that in. A random number generator. Come on. What's the point of a comment if I don't fill it in? All right, here we go. I should mention that these are running off of just standard random number generators here. It's just the default random number generator. You can put a seed in, and C#, the runtime will give you a random number. But here we go. It's just a pay table. So this, for example, tells you that you lose 85.7% of the time that you play Double Diamond Deluxe. You get 6 credits. 5% of the time you get 15 credits. 6% of the time, it's kind of interesting, you actually win more credits, so 15 credits more often than you win 6 credits. And then 1% of the time you're winning 30 credits, and it starts to get exponentially less, orders of magnitude less likely of occurring, okay? And basically all I do is I just take this table, I generate a random number between 0 and 1, and then I kind of go through the pay table and just figure out which chunk that number lands in. And then I return the payout amount. So, I mean, ultimately, under the covers, this is how basically every slot machine could work. It's just they have a bunch of stupid bullshit going on that, you know, makes it more exciting, quote-unquote. And speaking of stupid bullshit, let's go to Lucky Larry's Lobstermania, all right? So, Lucky Larry's Lobstermania has a lot of different symbols here, all right? So you got wild, you got logo, you got buoy, boat, lighthouse, tuna, clam, seagull, starfish, and then there's bonus and scatter, all right? Now, these two are interesting. I'll come back to those later. But, you know, underlying, it's about the same thing as red, white, and blue. You have these different reels. So I have reel 1, reel 2, reel 3, reel 4, and reel 5. This is actually a 5-reel game, okay? And each of these has different distributions of symbols. Now, it should be noted that the reels are actually uneven on Lucky Larry Lobstermania, all right? So I think that the final 2 reels have more symbols than the initial 3. I can't remember exactly, but you can take a look. You know, there you go. So the way that this one works is essentially what I do is okay, this I'll get to later, okay, all this shit. What I do is I just spin, you know, pretty much the same way as before. I get the spin symbols here, so I basically go through each reel and I generate these reel positions. But in this case, with Lucky Larry's Lobstermania, it's actually more... So with red, white, and blue, I could just kind of pull one of these symbols out of the reel, right? With Lucky Larry's Lobstermania, actually, if I end up getting this one, you know, if I choose this symbol right here, I actually need to pay attention to what's above and below it, because I think the bonus and the scatter, at least the scatter symbols, actually matter. So basically, scatter will pay out if it appears anywhere on the screen, and per reel you get 3 symbols on screen, okay? And so what ends up happening is I have to basically get the reel position and of the top symbol, and then if I need to wrap around to the beginning potentially, if I'm like landing at the bottom of the reel, so that I can get the ones that are below it essentially as I'm spinning, all right? And I'll get a set of symbols, so basically a 3x5 array of symbols, and that's what I get right here, okay? And then what I end up doing is I basically score the pay line initially, then I do the scatter scoring, and then if applicable, I do the bonus scoring. So let's start off with the pay line scoring, all right? So pay line scoring is basically just right here. We get the streak, okay? So basically all of the streaks of symbols have to start from the left and go to the right. So you cannot have a streak of symbols like in the middle. So for example, if reels 2, 3, and 4 had 3 of a kind, that wouldn't matter. You'd have to have it from 1 to 3 at least, okay? And basically all the different streaks will pay out different amounts. You can see here there's a pay table, and if our streak is contained in that pay table, then we return our amount, right? So basically what I'm doing is I'm tallying up the streak, but also, there are also wild symbols. Now, wild symbols can be scored in of themselves. So if the leftmost symbol is a wild, and you get like 3 wilds in a row, those have their own individual payout. But if I got like a lighthouse in the leftmost reel, so reel 1, and then I got a wild in reel 2, and then a lighthouse in reel 3, that would be considered 3 lighthouses in a row, okay? So basically I'm keeping track of that shit. We look up what the streak is in the pay table here, and they have all these different payouts, all right? So if you get 3 wilds in a row, then you're going to get the highest payout. And all these different payouts correspond to different streaks. So this is a streak of 2, 3, 4, and then 5. So 2, 3, 4, and then 5. So with wild and logo, if you get 2 of those in a row, you actually get a payout. But for all of these other ones, you get a 0 payout for getting 2 in a row. You need at least 3. And you can see here, if you get 5 wilds in a row, you get a 10,000 you know, credit payout right there, all right? So that's kind of how the pay line scoring goes. Let's go to, what is it? Scatter next. All right, scatter, the way that works is basically you just go through every symbol and you count up the number of scatter symbols, alright? You add them together, and then if you get 5 symbols, you get a 200 credit payout. If you have 4 symbols, you get a 25 credit payout, and if you get 3 symbols, you get a 5 credit payout. Now, you can actually play multiple pay lines on Lucky Larry's Lobstermania, and so you may think, oh, well, playing more lines gives you a lower, you know, average payout because of the scatter, right? Well, the thing is, the scatter pays out according to your total bet, so it's not just based on your bet for any individual line, so it actually doesn't matter. Pretty much at any machine that you play, like playing more lines doesn't actually give you an advantage, it just lets you play faster, okay? And that's definitely the case for Lucky Larry's Lobstermania. Now finally, let's go over the bonus. And I think the bonus is if you get, let me see here. I'm checking, yeah, row. So basically, okay, if on the pay line, you get 3 bonus symbols in a row, you activate the bonus, and this is the special bullshit bonus, let me tell you. Basically what you do is you get a bunch of lobster pots, and then all these different lobsters come out, and so basically it's a random number of lobster pots, which is going to be a number between 0 and, 1 and 3, okay? I believe, let me see here, so that's 0 to 2, and then, no, so, that's 2 to 4. Okay, 2 to 4 traps, okay? And, it's been a while since I've looked at this fucking code. But then, for each trap, you go through and you generate a certain number of lobsters, okay? Which is also, 2... No, this one's 2 to 4. Yeah, so 2 to 4. This one is 2 to 3 lobsters per pot, okay? And there you go. And then for each lobster, they'll have a certain weight, okay? And the weight will give you a certain number of credits. So you basically are, a bunch of lobster pots pop up, and a bunch of lobsters pop out of them, and each lobster has a certain payout, all right? And you add those together, and, you know, once again, this slot machine is full of stupid bullshit, let me tell you. That is 100% the case. But I will say the theme is charming to me, okay? Now, I was kind of quick and dirty. I'm going to leave a link to the code in the description below, so you can take a look at it on your own time. You're going to see here that I did not refactor this code out here, but what can you do? I could have made delegates and put them in a fucking list and shit, but I was like, I'm bored! I don't want to do this anymore! And so I just kind of copied and pasted because I'm a lazy asshole. But what can you do? But, yeah, I mean, when I say delegates, I mean, like, function pointers, okay? I could have, like, you know, put each strategy as a function pointer and iterated through them, and it would have made my life easier, but I didn't do that, alright? So, have fun looking through the code. Hope you enjoyed the Nerd Zone, but as you can see, there's a lot of stupid bullshit that goes on in these machines. In any case, I hope you had fun watching the video, and I will catch you in a future video, baby. Have fun. Bye-bye.